welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports, continuing coverage of Super Bowl 59 here from Radio Row at the New Orleans Convention Center. I'm Baker Machado, and we have an amazing conversation with you today with the CEO of the NFL Alumni Association, Brad Edwards. Brad, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Baker. Great to be here.
So let's talk about some of the initiatives and the things that you guys with the Alumni Association are right now working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do a couple things. One, we're a membership organization, so we've got thousands of former players, cheerleaders, coaches, front office staff that we do a host of support benefits for them, discounts, healthcare initiatives, healthcare benefits, all kinds of different stuff. And then we have this whole other 501c3 part of our operation that we do over $1 million a year of fundraising for third-party charities. And a lot of that is done through a campaign process where we have an initiative. It might be a determinant of health initiative. It might be a social responsibility initiative. We design a national campaign around it, bring in our players our as ambassadors around this. They create PSAs, they get the message out, do events, you name it, and that kind of varies. And we amplify that, and they really become those beacons of trust and inspiration back to their communities. And it might be a guy that had a cup of coffee in a camp somewhere, but that high school, that community around that high school,
that's a big deal for them.
It is a big deal, and they have a voice.
You mentioned health a lot. Obviously, player health and safety once they're done with the game, a big deal. Concussion, CTE, all of that. We actually saw concussions down this last year, which is significant. I'm curious your take on that and the introduction of the Guardian caps, if you felt like that helped, and if the response from alumni and players is positive after they're done, knowing that concussions are going down and their safety and their health is better.
And all of that are good things.
Yes.
And it's a myriad of reasons why that's happening. Certainly Guardian and the CAT, that's been very, very helpful. The technology, the player safety technology.
Probably the kickoffs also play a role. Yeah.
Around that certainly is one of them. The rules of the game. And now you're seeing, I don't know, I'm going to just throw a dart and pick a number of, at least a decade or maybe a decade and a half of rules changes and awareness that is now filtered down to a youth level. In my mind, unquantified, but I'd say it's probably never been safer to play the game of tackle football than it is today, from a youth level on up. And so now you're seeing that because of that cascading of the way the game has changed and the way the game is played now. I think that's contributing. We're literally trying to do and almost have taken the head out of the game.
Right, and my team, the Denver Broncos, giving tens of thousands of helmets to high school teams, showing them how safe the game has become. I'm also curious your take. The NFL has become more interested in flag football, especially because it's going to be an Olympic sport, which is going to be amazing. But I'm curious if, retired players, because there is an incredible roster of Hall of Famers, guys who still are pretty agile and can do this.
I want to get on a team.
I was going to say, do you think that there would be an interest in an alumni flag football league or anything?
Yeah, I think
because
so,
these players can now do this.
Yeah, and I played on one a few months ago. I live in Washington D.C. and we had the Capitol Police against members of the U.S. Legislature, both House and Senate. And there's a game that happens every year, and I got a chance to play in that this year. It was so much fun. Bunch of former players were out there participating in it. And while it was flag, there were a couple of times.
I'm sure.
Let me tell you something, Nick. It was close to being full-on tackle. So it was pretty amazing. But yes, growing, it's another way to just increase the ecosystem around the sport of football.
Also, the work you guys do in terms of supporting business ventures for a lot of these athletes afterwards, because I think for so many of them where football has been their entire life, figuring out that next step in the journey, I'm sure is a challenge, but it seems like you guys are really trying to help them with that.
It's obviously it's health on one end, it's connectivity, back to the Shield, back to their former colleagues, connectivity back in through the fundraising apparatus in their local communities. And then it's also helping them, make that transition, monetize their name, image, and likeness, help them find the tools to understand, from a business. How do you register a business?
Mm-hmm.
How do I figure out what kind of business?
A lot of people don't know that.
Get into.
A lot of people don't know how to do that.
How do I operate the books? All of that. How do I sell a product? All of those kinds of things. And so we want to participate in that. And we've got a great ecosystem, with the league and the union and the alumni association, all really working together for the benefit of former players.
I know you work obviously for the NFL now, but in a previous life, you worked in college sports with George Mason University. I'm curious your take from an athletic director's perspective. This Wild West we're in with NIL,
and it is
because it just keeps evolving and changing, and you feel bad in many ways for these athletic directors trying to figure out how to get this system. What's your take on the NIL world?
Because after 9 years in the NFL, and I came out and I went right to work as a CFO at the University of South Carolina, where I played for it. And I can remember coming out then and saying this in one of the first SEC AD meetings I went to in, June of 2000, I think. And I made some comment because I came out understanding I lived this world of licensing and free agency and NIL and all of that. And I kind of had this idea, well, we have the stadiums, we have the fans, we have the players, why don't we think about professionalizing this and go do our own thing? And I kind of got quickly told to sit down and be quiet. Mm-hmm. Well, here we are. And so we just, I think because I understood it, got out ahead of it when some of these states started implementing state laws granting that right so we knew at George Mason we had to get way out ahead of it, which we did, back in 2021. But it's at some point it really is the Wild West, and you're seeing the transfer of money from facilities and coaches to players, and at some point I do believe that'll level out. But it's
I was going to ask you, because for schools like George Mason, how do you compete when teams like Ohio State have a $20 million NIL budget?
I
mean, obviously, George Mason, anybody can win in March Madness, but it seems like it's making it difficult for these smaller schools to continue to compete against all these other big giants.
And it's not even the mid-majors like that, where you're almost trying to bang your head against the wall to do what can't be done, unless you catch lightning in a bottle. But as soon as you get you get that one really, really great player, they're moving up. They have to. You can't turn that down. And it's almost, the reality is almost, if you're not in the top half of the Big Ten or the SEC, do you really have a chance?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the reality that we're facing now. You might have a school that's got a $250 million budget, and another school that's in a Power 4 conference that's got 120. I mean,
yeah, it's crazy.
That's $100 million.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's insane. I guess I would ask you, from an athletic director standpoint, do you feel like, us growing up, athletic directors usually were people that worked at universities, had backgrounds in universities. Now they're business backgrounds. Yeah, these are CEOs of companies that are now coming into this. Do you feel like that's going to be the change in athletic directors across the pond or across everywhere? Because you got to have the business acumen for it.
You got to have the business acumen, and you just have to understand that. And I knew enough to be dangerous. I worked half of my NFL career for Merrill Lynch, so I sort of had that, and I felt like I was a good fit for it. But absolutely, and what you're seeing in terms of a professionalized model, which is what you have, and really the kind of sad thing, because I always loved the academic side of it, is it's not really part of the conversation today. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that is something that we still want people long term to get a degree.
Absolutely. We could talk about this stuff forever. Brad, such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. The CEO of the NFL Alumni Association joining us here on Radio Row. That's Brad Edwards. I'm Baker Machado. We got a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.